Peter Boland's back on the show today. This time he is here to talk about his new book called The Seven Stone Path, An Everyday Journey to Wisdom. One of the things I love most about this book is that it brings together concepts and understandings from different approaches in life, whether religion, spiritual, stoic, all these different ways. It brings it together into familiarized concepts so that you can really see how a lot of these, well, pretty much every religion, spiritual practice, whatever it is really saying the same thing. It's just presenting it to you in different ways. So that's the things I love about this book the most is that it brings that information to you. It gives you the opportunity to see the crossover, leaving still opportunities for you to interpret this information. So we get to a little point where as we're going through the book and the workbook, we talk about how artificial intelligence might be working its way into philosophy and spiritual practices and the correlation between the two. But overall, this is just a really beautiful conversation about life and about how we can approach life and how we can support ourselves and each other through life. Really hope you get something out of the conversation. We'll see you on the other side. All right, welcome back to our show. I'm very excited to have Peter Boland back. So if you've been following the show, Peter's been on a couple times. Peter has most recently written a book that is touched me in a very deep way. It's amazing. It's called The Seven Stone Path, An Everyday Journey to Wisdom. And, you know, when I started listening to Peter on YouTube and ingesting his information, knew that the man knew what he was talking about. He's a professor in college, you know, just amazing stuff. And the more I started to talk to you and actually get to interview you, you know, just there's certain people, you know, one of our podcast episodes is titled When the Student's Ready, the Teacher Appears. And you were that person for me, whether you knew it or not. And you're probably that person for a lot of people on YouTube, whether you know it or not, right? It's like we don't realize the influence that we have, but it's out there, right? And so getting to know you better through the interviews that we've done and then hearing about your process of writing a book, it was very exciting to me because religious and spiritual documentation, text, breakdowns, you know, how to chew this, how to understand what we're looking at is something I think is extremely important, you know, because there's so many different ways to interpret. And when you find your way to interpret things, that's beautiful. But finding your way to trust your interpretation of what you're actually reading, I think is very hard. And a lot of us kind of maybe fall in a trap of that. So finding the right teacher is a beautiful thing. And so Peter has been my teacher now, whether he likes it or not, for a few years. And so this book that he's written, it's my second time through it right now. He's just put out a workbook for it as well. But I figured we'd have him on today, talk about his book, this contribution to this beautiful literature that's out there, and you know the process, the content, you know the workbook, all that stuff, and just see where the conversation leads us. Peter has a vast well of knowledge inside that brain of his, and I just love where these conversations go. So, Peter, thank you so much for letting me be long-winded and welcoming you back to our show.
Thank you, Adam. It's so good to be back on Journey. Can we just call your podcast Journey?
Journey. There you go.
I love it.
Just like the band, right?
a little different, yeah.
Well, man, I'm so excited to have you back. You know, as soon as your book came out, I bought it right away and plowed through it, and just it felt like I was talking to you again. And you're one of my favorite guests. You're actually one of the highest rated guests that I have on my podcast, which I don't think I've told you that. So it was just like having a conversation with you over coffee, you know, just listening to you talk about the pearls of wisdom, the ways to approach the wisdom paths out there. But I think one of the things that this book initially reminded me of, and, you know, in the work that I do, you know, I have my ideas that help me get through life, right? And I work with a lot of people with different ideas that get them through life, right? Different approaches, right? And we all have our different ways to approach. And what this book really reminded me is that there are countless ways that you can find information to support your path. It's finding your way to interpret the knowledge that's out there so that that you find meaning in it, right? And so like with Buddhism, with Confucianism, with Christianity, with Catholicism, with the religions, with the spiritualities, when you break it down, even and you don't talk about this in the book, but even things like Satanism and anarchy and or atheism, if you really break down the understanding of these practices, it's just to be a good person, not be a dick, right? Some practices like Satanism, they have less rules, but they still break it down to just like, hey, do what you feel is right for you, right? And so that's that reminder that I get when I read a book like this is that everything is saying exactly the same thing. It's just how are you wanting to interpret it so that it lands somewhere within you, so that it strikes a chord in you. And I think that's the beauty of a book like this is it opens up the idea that the knowledge is there for you to find it.
I'm grateful for your description of your experience around this book, Adam, because that was really kind of a guiding motivation for me when I sat down and kind of mapped this book out 14 years ago. Like, what the heck am I going to do here? I feel like something needs to be done, and I want to take all these ideas as a community college philosophy and religious studies and mythology professor working with tens of thousands of students over the decades and studying all these wonderful wisdom traditions. Certain ideas began to rise to the surface that I felt were most useful. That was always a guiding principle for me. Give me something I can use, because philosophy is sometimes justifiably accused of being kind of, navel gazing or intellectually abstract, or it's just like intricacy for the sake of intricacy.
Yes.
And believe me, I love all that ornamentation, but it also leaves me a little cold. And I wanted to I kept thinking back to the students that I've crossed paths with, who I saw a kind of light turning on in their eye as they began to understand the Four Noble Truths of Buddhism, or
Mm.
this Stoicism idea, or whatever. And that's the good stuff, right? The inner transformation, the awakening, or maybe even the affirmation of glimmerings of inner knowing that you've had since you were 9 years old. And then you hear some philosophy professor in a class say it out loud because it's a Buddhist idea. And you're like, holy cow, like I'm recognizing now my own longing for wisdom in the great voices of the wisdom traditions. And that recognition is so affirming
Mm.
and so validating. And back to my earlier point, it's so pragmatic. It's so like, here's an idea that's going to help me heal the disintegration that I'm feeling, the depression, the anxiety, the dysfunction, the fear. Here's some medicine for that. So give me some more.
Yeah. And I think, to your point too, when you can find different ways to present similar types of information, um, every human is built differently. Our school system is based off like an average way of learning. Most people
Right.
learn this way, so let's present knowledge in this way. And if you do good, then you're better than that. If you don't, then you're lower than average, and we'll figure it out. Right? But we know that humans have the ability to learn if we find the way to meet them with where they're at. And I think bringing things like this, these concepts in different ways to people can help people understand that they do get this, right? It may not be in the this, our, that, not, whatever Roman language you're trying to decipher or whatever biblical text you're trying to get through. It's chewy sometimes. It's like chewing an IPA. It's just like you're eating it's like it's so much, right? But
Yeah.
if you can find somebody that can break these understandings down to an approachable way for you, that almost helps the ego a little bit to be like, hey, I actually get some of this. Like I've thought about this before. I've just never thought about it in the verbiage that you've spoken it to me now. So now that I have context to that, I can have faith and have confidence that I'm understanding this and find my own way to approach it instead of being so turned off by all of the verbiage or the concepts that you just say F it and throw your hands up and walk away and just do your best on your own.
Sometimes I feel like that's what's the most valuable thing about either classes I teach, talks I give, or books like this, is not even the surface content of the book or the specific concepts, but that feeling again of of being invited into a conversation that's been going on for thousands of years all over the world, across all borders, temporal and geographical, and you feel yourself being drawn into the heart of this universal human longing
Hmm.
to, for wisdom, for wholeness, for love, for coming out of confusion and into clarity. That's the root meaning of the word philosophy, this love of wisdom, this longing that we feel to come out of our loneliness and our angst. And so back to your earlier point, that was key for me to write this book in a conversational way. And I think of all the feedback I've gotten about this book, the most common, like if I was going to do one of those word maps that you do in your computer,
Uh-huh.
um, or whatever they're called, where the most prominent words of a group's feedback sort of become the largest words in the image.
Uh-huh.
It would be something like, this book feels like you're just talking to the author over a cup of coffee. There's a conversational, very down to earth tone. It's not an academic book. So it's not for some of my fellow philosophy colleagues.
Yeah.
I wanted to be, like what Joseph Campbell did for mythology, what Carl Sagan did for astrophysics. Let's take these really arcane fields of esoteric knowledge and and put it in people's hands. Folks that have busy lives doing the great things they're doing. So how to take it out of the sort of proprietary ownership of the specialists and put it into a generalist tone with the emphasis on practicality. That's why every chapter ends with a summary called A Wise Person. And it's just sort of, this is how these qualities would be if they were embodied in someone.
Mm.
And every chapter closes with a guided meditation to just sort of let these ideas kind of go down deeper into our awareness.
There's something with me about books that end with guided meditations. I love it so much. I mean, for me personally, I love it because it adds more content for me to kind of look over and to sit with. But I do a lot of events, and so like I speak a lot, and so it's so nice to have something like that to be able to pull information from when I'm doing like a yoga nidra or like some kind of meditation or something. So for personally, I mean, just for me, I love. I'm not sorry for plagiarizing you sometimes, Peter, but
Do it,
it's
do it.
beautiful, right? The words you write are amazing, so I have to use it sometimes.
Well, that's, this workbook that I put together there's a ton of questions for each chapter to
Yeah.
lead people through. And toward the end of each section of the workbook is just, hey, invite your group to read aloud the section called A Wise Person, or invite someone to read aloud the guided meditation. The rest of you just close your eyes and do it. So,
Yeah.
that's one of the things you learn in studying wisdom traditions the conceptual intellectual work is an important part of it,
Yeah.
but it is insufficient without embodying and allowing these insights to sink beneath the thought stream into the awareness of our deeper selves. And you could vocabularize that in the vocabulary of any particular wisdom tradition. But
Mm,
there we are more than just a mind full of thoughts.
right.
And so that's what those final sections of each chapter are about.
Yeah, it really reminds me of the Buddhist tradition of the Dharma talks after a meditation. It's where you have that opportunity to sit, you meditate, do what you need to do, but afterwards you have the person that is guiding the meditation, whether it's a guided meditation or they're just sitting there at the head. As soon as everything's done, it's like you have this beautiful conversation about anything. It could be about life, it could be about love, it could be about loss, compassion, grief, but it's this in-depth opportunity for you to talk, to listen, to absorb after you've cleared your body in this meditation. And it's so
Mm.
reminiscent of that. It almost, I mean, it made me feel like I was sitting in my local Buddhist temple over in Woodinville. The first
Right
time I
on.
read the wise person after the first chapter, I'm like, oh man, I feel like I should be like sitting here with the blanket wrapped around my shoulders, like in cross leg, looking up at a person on a podium. It's such a, and I think that's what this is.
Cool.
Things like this invoke that sense of reverence right? And that sense of there's something beautiful happening. There's information being shared in a very deep, deep way that you might get right now, but you're going to get even deeper the more you think, the more you ruminate, the more you sit with this stuff, and the more you
Mm.
talk about it, right? Having those opportunities to have book clubs or to have this workbook to be able to really fish out those deep ideas that might be just boiling right under the surface that just need that little poke from the right kind of verbiage.
And a lot of people, I think, have a misconception about philosophy, that it is just strictly an intellectual, conceptual idea, practice, or you know, like a stack of books that you can kind of go to that are just full of ideas. And again, that's certainly part of it, but I wanted to emphasize again the idea that philosophy is an activity. It's not a set of ideas, disembodied ideas that can be transferred from one person to another. You kind of, wisdom is something you have to kind of live through and experience, and feel in your body and feel in your soul and in your heart, and all those words we use to try to talk about this mysterious humanness that we are. But philosophy is far more than just intellectual or cerebral.
Yeah, yeah, and I appreciate people that speak to people instead of speak over people. You know, and I think there's a lot of what you just said in philosophy that kind of turned me off in the very beginning was
Um,
I didn't realize how to ingest it, and I didn't have a teacher at the time, but also like I just didn't understand the way things were being. You know, the first time I read the Bhagavad Gita, I read somebody just gave it to me, and there was no cliff notes, there was no nothing. It was just the book, the Bhagavad Gita, the chapter from the Mahabharata, and I read it, and it was like a chore. You know, it was
yeah.
such a chore to sit there and read through what Arjuna was talking to Krishna about and all these names that I could barely pronounce and I didn't
Oh God,
understand.
yeah.
And then I read a number of years later, I read Eknath Iswaran's version where he prefaces each chapter with his breakdown of like, hey, this is what they're
Yep.
going to talk about. This is kind of what to expect. And I mean, to my own ignorance, I had no idea that version of a book was out there for any type of concepts out there. And so I immediately snatched up all of his books and was like, cool, all right, well, he's a teacher that I can figure out, you know?
Sure.
And so I think it's really important to be able to make this information palatable to our generations that are current, right? You know, the generations that are coming through right now are speaking very differently than we spoke, right? And we're
Yeah.
speaking very differently than our predecessors spoke, you know? And so, like, finding that way to meet the person where they're at, not holding this thing up here and saying, no, 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 you need to figure out my vocabulary to get this information. No, let's make this information palatable through all vocabulary levels, you know?
Yeah, you learn that early on as a teacher. You have to start where students are.
All right.
And Confucius has this line that often comes to mind, that oh, now it's left my mind because I thought of something else. But just talking with you does that. I have so many ideas that I'm thinking about here, but it'll swing. I'll get back to that later. You know how it
Oh
is.
yeah.
But there is, oh yeah, that what a joy and what a pleasure it is to learn, and at due times express what one has learned. There's an enjoyment in learning that is often, I think, overlooked.
Mm,
And it's just really exciting to kind of come into the space of new ideas again that you sort of recognize as relevant to you, as relevant to your pain, to your situation. And that is this an enormous gift to
mm,
experience with a group of people. But we need teachers. It's another line of Confucius that the job of a teacher is to reanimate the past. So how do you take and that's what Eknath Easwaran did with the Bhagavad Gita. He's this Indian-born professor of English literature of all things who comes to California, who has had a long career teaching at Berkeley, and took it upon himself to create fresh English translations of the Bhagavad Gita and the Dhammapada of Buddhism and a bunch of the Upanishads. And I have them right here on my desk that are just constant go-to books, because he does what you just said, is he finally kind of translates it in a way that you finally hear it. Because some of the free copies that are given away by the Society for Krishna Consciousness, the Hare Krishnas and others, who set up a table on my college campus and hand out Bhagavad Gitas. But in my opinion, those translations translated by their head guru are rather impenetrable,
Hmm.
and don't meet you where you are, and they invite you into an esoteric practice, which is going to take a lot of work to kind of crack the code. And I think that's what great translators do, is they put it in a vernacular that is familiar to us, so that we can use it. And I've when I started my teaching career, I specifically headed for community college because I wanted to teach nothing but introductory classes.
Hmm.
Most of my students are not going to become philosophy majors. So I'm teaching people who are going to go on and live all kinds of other lives as dental hygienists and Uber drivers and entrepreneurs and teachers and God knows what, right?
Hmm.
Re, realtors. But they're going to be citizens. They're going to raise families. They're going to be neighbors, and they need to know about the wisdom of the Tao Te Ching and the Bhagavad Gita and Socrates too. Maybe more so than philosophy majors do. So I was always drawn to that idea of, let me be the tour guide to some of this stuff for folks who've never heard of it before.
That's such a beautiful, beautiful approach to that. I've never really thought about that before, and it's like, everybody, I guess, what it reminds me of is Vipassana. The first time I ever did a Vipassana, and you're sitting there. I think it's day 4, day 5. Day 3 is when Goenka finally comes on. They finally, play the voice of Goenka over, and he starts giving you the Dharma talks and stuff. But the first 3 days, you're just sitting there in pain. You're like, my knees hurt, my back hurts. I've been meditating for 11 hours a day for 3 days now, and this is
This
crazy.
is
I can't
stupid.
talk.
Yeah.
I can't do yoga. All I can do is walk, eat, and sleep, and meditate. But one of the things they talk about finally is how, we're in a world where we have what they call householders, right? Not everybody can omit themselves and go dedicate themselves to live in a cave in the Himalayas and just like pray to God and do all the things and not be triggered, not be surrounded by society, holding space for humanity, right? Great. Good for you. That's amazing. But there's still, 8.5
Yeah.
billion people in this world. And a lot of us have to be part of that world, part of the economy, part of the society, part of the community
Raising
of it.
kids.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. So being that householder is what they call it. But, a lot of times those householders might not have information geared towards them. Right.
Right.
And like you just said, like we're all a part of this world. We're all a part of this society. And if your like Chick-fil-A manager has some understanding of the Bhagavad Gita or the Tao or, Christian religion or something like that, that lands in a beautiful way with that person, that might allow that person to be a better manager in the world that they live in, a better, parent, a better whatever it is. So making this information a place where everybody can go get it, you don't have to dedicate your life to it, but you're in familiarizing yourself with the concepts of it. It's just giving us a better opportunity to live better lives and to be better parts of
Yeah.
society.
And that's why the subtitle, the book is called The Seven Stone Path, and the subtitle is An Everyday Journey to Wisdom. And for me, that word every day means two things at least. It means like there's a consistent commitment to practice every day. But every day also means a kind of down to earth, ordinary. Oh, it's just an everyday, loaf of bread. It's not fancy bread or whatever.
Yeah.
So there's that kind of ordinariness that I wanted to convey as well. Let's demystify the process.
Definitely. Well, how did you, so in all of the information that you've been either teaching or ingesting over the years, how did you land on these 7 kind of concepts to interweave within the book itself?
It's a great question, and I don't exactly know how to answer it briefly. It's not like I just woke up one day and these 7 ideas had arranged themselves in a neat, coherent list. It each of these ideas kind of came up out of the fog as, these are very important. The first one's acceptance. And I thought maybe I should start there because that's where Buddhism and Stoicism begins. To how can I bring about change in my life if I at first do not let go of all of my resentments and all of my unmet, my anger about unmet expectations. And
Mm,
that's all in the Four Noble Truths of Buddhism. So the book kind of starts there, like, how do I cultivate the consciousness of acceptance, accepting things the way they are, and the second one's surrender. Because then they just started to kind of, once I picked a starting point, well, then I need to talk about surrender, which is really just kind of another word for acceptance, but it's much deeper. It's much more active, ironically. You're consciously letting go of the illusion that you are the manager of the universe. But then I thought, okay, those first two are pretty soft, acceptance and surrender. The third one needs to be, again, the Bhagavad Gita, engagement or action,
Mm.
uh, which is so key. It's like, okay, I have to be in the world. I have to get some food today. I have to deal with all these other people. And so wisdom traditions have to deal with what is right action, what is the moral way to be engaged in the world, knowing that I never have enough information, that no matter what I do, as the Gita teaches us, no matter what I do, somebody's going to get hurt, somebody's going to be angry. And yet to stay true to my dharma, to my purpose anyway. So the wisdom of engagement is the third stone. And then
Well, that one for me, it really, and you talk about this in the book, but that one it resonates with me a lot. The engagement side, and when you talk about how the Father Michael prayer, allow me to be an
Mhm.
instrument, um, that was one of the hardest concepts for me to get early on in my understanding of practicing, and but now has become one of the most important parts of my practice is like the surrenderment of, yes, I am a human being in this life.
Yeah.
I've woken up today, so clearly I have something to do. So, hey, let me sit in my meditation and open myself up to the understanding of, I'm going to be a vessel today. I'm going to get some shit done for you. So let me find the strength to do that, and let me just be that thing that you need, right? And that was a hard concept for me to get, because that's a lot of like turning off your ego, because my ego's like, but you have shit to do, Adam. You're going to go to yoga.
Yeah.
You're going to do this interview with Peter. You've got things to do, right? Well, if I just open myself up to my dharma, uh, clearly my dharma, part of my dharma is talking with Peter and keeping myself healthy, so moving my body in some kind of way,
Yeah.
right? And so it's almost like you're playing with your own emotions in the way that you want to talk to yourself and receive information to get to those points of getting out of your own goddamn way.
And, surrender sounds so soft. It sounds like giving up. So we have some unlearning to do initially, which is to kind of reframe our understanding of surrender, not as defeat, not as weakness, but as actually a stance of incredible empowerment. When you're, when you, when you, when you come into a task like we're doing right now, where we're having this conversation, which we hope has value for someone.
Hmm.
We don't come in, you and I aren't reading off a list of bullet points. We're just showing up here trusting that our daily work of many, many years behind us has kind of carried us to this place where we can move through a set of questions, and ideas will arise in due course, in due proportion. We're both listening, we're both speaking, and so we're surrendering to something.
Mm.
And that gets to the next stone, which is allowance. To go in, well, after engagement, to go to allowance, which is to act in a way that is in deep cooperation with what is already unfolding. All of that Taoist Wu Wei stuff, that was an important one for me to kind of add. And I struggled with the word allowance because that the primary meaning of that word is that little bit of money mom and dad gave you when you were a kid.
Right. Yeah.
Where's my weekly allowance, at least for ordinary middle class folks, I guess, who had money to give to their kids. But I get a quarter when I was 8 or something, then it went up to 50 cents, and now it's probably $20 a week.
Exactly.
God knows.
Exactly. Right. Yeah.
Here's your debit card,
Right.
whatever.
Yeah.
But anyway, by allowance, I mean that sense of fluidity of what the Taoists call Wu Wei, of creative letting be. Just like when you're surfing, you paddle out into the water, you're not in charge of the waves, you don't control any of it. Your only opportunity for engagement is to move into accord with what is already unfolding. And there's your power,
Mm.
is how well can you cooperate with what is already unfolding. That's how nature works. That's how all wildlife lives. There's a weird alchemy, a combination of individual assertion and communal surrender.
Yeah. And there's an analogy you also make in the book revolving around surfing as well about how like if you say you're on the wave and you fall off the wave, if you fight the wave in the water, it's going to last forever. You're going to tumble, you're going to feel like it's an hour forever underneath there. But if you just surrender to that wave and allow it to do what it needs to do, it'll just brush
Mhm.
right over you. You'll be up above water before you know it, you know?
Yeah, you won't panic. Panic is what kills people when they're drowning. It's not the water.
Right.
And so struggling against something as the opposite of allowance. But we also have to be cautious, and that's why you have to write a whole book instead of just a 1,000 word blog post,
Yeah.
because we have to be clear about what surrender does not mean. You do not surrender to your abusive partner. You do not surrender to slavery in society. You do not surrender to injustice and stupidity and cruelty and vulgarity. These things exist, but there is still work to do to make the world more just,
Yeah.
to contribute in that, that beautiful Jewish Hebrew phrase from the Kabbalah tradition, Tikkun Olam, to participate in the healing of the world. This is
Mhm.
our purpose. And so there is will always work to be done.
Yeah.
And so we aren't, people hear the word acceptance or allowance or surrender and they think, oh, am I supposed to just be a doormat and let everybody wipe their feet on me? Absolutely not. So this is a kind of action that is egoless, without attachment to outcomes, but highly engaged in the same way that all other energy around us is highly engaged.
Yeah, that's I think that's important too. Like, we can think that spirituality or religious folks they're very passive and they just allow. I trust in God. I trust in spirit. I
Yeah,
trust
it
the
is God's
universe.
will.
Right,
Yeah,
exactly. And actually, when I first started I went from a very corporate, non-religious, non-spiritual life to, finding my way with this. And I remember
yeah.
the first few times I practiced at yoga studios and I'm still, very new to the communities, new to the verbiage, new to the understandings. But the thing that used to really ping me, and I understand why it does now, but before I didn't put context to it, I was just like, that's a fucking stupid statement. It's I would hear all these people say, "Well, I'm just gonna trust in the universe. I just trust that the
Mm.
universe is gonna do this," and I've heard that phrase before, but I would never see any follow up. Right? It's like I'm gonna trust the universe to provide for me, and while I'm trusting the universe, I'm gonna sit on my couch and watch Netflix.
Well, no, that
Ex-
second part needs to be
right?
changed.
Exactly, and it's like, okay, trust, yes, trust, I get that part, but there should be still some effort on your side to show that you deserve the trust that you're asking for, right? So
Yeah.
like if I'm asking for peace but I go out and I kick my dog and then I scream at my kid, then whatever God is
Yeah.
up there is going to look at me and be like, well, clearly you found peace because you're asking for peace, and then you're following that up by screaming at somebody and hitting something else. So if that's your definition of peace, boobity bobbity boom, you found it, right? There you go. Right?
This is the integration, which is the seventh stone, right? That the
Mm,
book is moving toward. It's like this is the paradox that has to be integrated in a life that leans into wisdom. Namely, how do I commit to action while simultaneously uh, allowing things to unfold on their own? And
yeah.
it sounds like crazy talk. So when people mouth these platitudes about I'm just going to let the universe take care of it or whatever, perhaps on a in a most positive interpretation of that, it means I'm not going to act from ego and run around pissed off and demanding that the world is not heeding my will,
Yeah.
but instead I'm going to stay very, very engaged, while at the same time letting everything else around me unfold, but according to its terms. Just as a tree, just as a sapling growing in a meadow, is going to do everything it can to engage in expanding its own life, to allow its natural growth to occur. It doesn't have delusions of control over the weather or what other organisms around them are doing. It just says, how can I work with what's happening here?
Right. It's kind of like that Taoist middle path, right? Yes, I'm
Yep.
on a path, but and if I get pulled to the right, that's great. I'll move over to the right, but I'm not tied to the right side. And if I get pulled to the left, I'll move over towards the left and just find my way back, towards that center side. But allowing that the freedom of life to move you where it feels it needs you to go, but without you saying, no, I'm gonna go here, I need to go there, or I need to stay here.
Yeah, exactly. And so after those first acceptance, surrender, engagement, allowance, after the first four, we get to five, six, and seven, which are enjoyment, love, and integration. And enjoyment is a chapter about trying to navigate how to be in the world, um, and be at play in the field of forms, neither a life denying ascetic or a ridiculously dysfunctional hedonist, but some kind of middle path there. It's like, let's enjoy the fact that there is pleasure, that there is enjoyment. In fact, there is something sacred about enjoyment. Again, the one, rooted in ahimsa, or nonviolence, or non-harm to others. So that seemed like an important piece to add in. Philosophy gets a bad rap for being kind of dour and severe, and but there ought to be more laughing and enjoyment and pleasure, and it's a beautiful world. And so the idea of kama from the Hindu tradition, Kama, that's one of the aims of life, is to feel joy, and maybe even there's something sacred, not maybe, about sunsets, about a
Mm,
star-filled sky, and about a newborn baby. And th- th- if you're not smiling at these things, you're stuck in your mind. You got to come into the flow of what is actually happiness. This is a beautiful, blissful world. And so that's a part of, and in fact, I argue in the book that enjoyment is the natural outcome that arises when you get a little bit better at the first four steps: acceptance, surrender, allowance, and engagement. And then you move into love. And I had to write a chapter about that. Boy, what a crazy word that is. It
yeah.
just means so much. It means so much that it almost ends up meaning nothing.
Mm,
And there was a lot of housekeeping to do around that word, and there's a lot of exploring. And then the last stone is integration. And I hope to kind of, now that we've thought through all these previous six stones or ideas, that let's see if we can kind of make peace with paradox and talk about integration in a couple of ways: in the Jungian way of
mm.
personal integration, making peace with my own shadow, and also practicing what all the wisdom traditions ask us to do, compassion, karuna, or forgiveness, and recognize that the people around us are flawed, working with not enough information either, and their own woundedness, and just like us, they're kind of muddling through, and you're not going to find perfect people anywhere. And so how do we let go of our constant resentment and disappointment? And to me, all of the stones are really facets of one stone, and that was the mystery I was kind of toying with the whole time.
Hmm. I think that ending on the integration side, makes so much sense. But I think it's super important too that that's a step that I feel is missed a lot of times,
Yeah.
especially if you have excitement about entering a new modality, right? Whether it's a healing modality, a knowledge modality, whatever it is. Um, right now I see it a lot with plant medicines. There's a big excitement about plant medicines and what they can do for us, right? Whether
Hmm.
it's ayahuasca or psilocybin or even the energetic medicines like ketamine or MDMA. And there are beautiful therapy programs now set up to hold space for you in those moments. So if you need somebody, a guide of some sort, there's those people there. Those are programs that are there.
Yeah.
But especially early on, what I've seen been the misstep is the integration afterwards, right? So you've had this big moment, like you saw God in your ayahuasca experience, right? You've sat in the volume of your brain and pulled out books and books and books and read them from cover to cover about your anxiety and your depression and your psilocybin journeys, right? You've had all these moments, and then you just wake back up as Adam, right? there needs to be somebody or some process or something
This
there,
guy again.
yeah,
Yeah.
to talk to you about it. How did that feel? What did you learn? It's like that workbook that
Yeah.
you've created for this. Like we need that integration. That integration is one of the most important parts of the entire experience, right? So set and setting, I think, is the most important part of any kind of
Mm.
journey. Like have your set and setting. But the integration side of it, I think, is now understanding where we're getting to that point to where we know how important it is. But I think it's been a misstep in the beginning of a lot of our journeys, and so to end with that integration side, and now to follow it up with the workbook, I think is very very special for anybody that's chewed this already or has this in their future.
That saying, we make the path by walking.
Mm.
And that, and I always couple that in my own mind with that great line from Krishnamurti of truth is a pathless land. And so the central image, and it's something I sort of, spoiler alert here, something I sort of reveal in the seventh chapter is there is no path. The whole image around which this book is constructed, that there is this seven stone path, is just an image. It's a useful kind of thought structure to play with as we move through our inquiry into these ideas. But when we get to the end, we realize there really isn't literally a path, and yet, uh, the most important part of any philosophical inquiry is the inquiry itself, not like, well, tell me the answers. And philosophy sometimes gets this kind of weird bad rap. Well, it's just a bunch of questions. It never answers anything. What use is philosophy? They still haven't answered any of their questions. And I get that. That seems like a legitimate point to raise. But once you spend some time in the work, you realize, no one can give you the answers secondhand. It's through the engagement with this inquiry with other good people around you and a guide, maybe, that you will begin to experience welling up from within you increasing clarity, increasing peace, wellness.
Mm.
And that's that's a pleasure that is so delicious and so sweet and so surprisingly subtle and powerful. And it can't be, you can't get that from 6 hours on psilocybin with a guide. What that's going to do is some amazing stripping away of some
Hmm.
of the maybe old ways of thinking that need to go. And so it polishes a window, and you can sort of see through the window more clearly now. But now you have to kind of open the door and get out of the house, right? And really start to travel, and apply, through trial and error, all of these new possibilities that you begin to see that you hadn't seen before until the window got cleaned.
Right, right. And you mentioned in the beginning of this talk is like I think that's one of the most important things about having a good teacher. Is they know when to apply the gas and the brakes. Right, they know how to integrate what you've just experienced. They know how to share that space with you. So you don't. So your experiences reach the full potential of what they can be. Right. I
Yeah.
can honestly say a lot of times, and even with meditation in my beginning of my journey, I didn't have a teacher. It was something that, a concept somebody dropped in my lap, and I'm like, okay, I can sit. We'll figure this out. And I sat for years and just listened to my breath and listened to my back in pain and my knees aching and barely found, if anything, any points of meditation. But finding the right teacher to help guide me and help me, listen to my breath and these things that the right kind of teacher for you can hold that space for you and help you out. But it's part of it's part of all of those seven steps to get to the point to where you can accept the information coming in from a teacher or the knowledge that you actually need a teacher. I think is ingrained in all of these seven steps. Acceptance of the understanding that you don't know everything, surrendering to the concept that there's knowledge out there you'll never grasp. It's kind of like going into a library and being surrounded by vast volumes of all the knowledge in the world that you'll ever need at your fingertips, but being
What
depressed
good
that
is
you'll
that?
never read it
Yeah.
all, right?
You can't.
It's like,
Good.
fucking hell.
Yeah.
Well, with actually, I okay. So the second time reading this book through, I had a question that popped in my head, and it's kind of a philosophical question, and it's kind of wrapped up in the idea of artificial intelligence.
Uh,
And so one of the ideas that I've been reading a lot about AI, and if this is out of your scope, all good, we can move on. But one of the ideas about AI that I've been learning about or reading about is how they're trying to train it to be more human, right? Train it to be more understanding of the human emotions, the human decision making scale that we have to, embody every single day. All the things that go into that, because right now, from my understanding, is AI is very, very, very non empathetic with the way that they approach decisions, right? So the idea is that they're creating these opportunities for AI to experience different versions of life so that they can get a back catalog basically of how to approach love and divorce and separation and all this shit that we do, right? And in reading all of that, it sounds a lot like the concept of reincarnation to me, right? Where we
ah,
have human beings reliving, going through countless, countless versions of life so that our souls can fully embrace and understand all the aspects of the human experience, the emotional spectrum that we sit with, all the things that we do. That correlation to me is very strange,
that's interesting.
and it's very interesting because like as impactful as we expect artificial intelligence to be, um in a way, and I did read this concept from somewhere else. I can't remember where. It's not my concept, but this really landed with me. But there's this idea out there that nature created and helped humans evolve so we can be the artificial intelligence of nature. Nature can't go out there and swing a hammer and build, right? Nature can't direct what it wants to create. It creates, right? And so the idea was that fungus, because humans share more DNA commonalities with fungus than we do with plants, and plants than fungus, right? We share more with fungus. It's very interesting. So the
Yeah.
idea, one of those concepts, is like, nature was like, hey, all right, monkey people bipedals, right? We're gonna put language in you and give you a thumb, the god's finger, and let you swing hammers and build shit and go out there and make us proud. And now we've gotten to that point to where we've not exhausted the what we can do, but we're getting close, right? And so now we're creating now something that's outside of what we can do, but we have to train it as we're being trained to continue the project of humanity in a way. That's very
You know,
interesting.
yeah, it is. Carl Sagan put it this way, and he's a materialist, right? An atheist. He said that we are the universe's capacity to be conscious of itself.
Mm,
So we are the eyes and ears and conceptual mind that has evolved out of the elements around us to ask questions like, what is the universe? And what is a human being, and so on. So our sentience, our capacity to introspect, to look within, and to create elaborate conceptual understandings of all of this energy and form around us is, through one lens anyway, is simply the universe evolving to the point where it becomes conscious of itself.
mm,
And so this is what sci-fi writers that we all grew up with kind of played with, like, Blade Runner, right? I mean,
mm.
what happens when the robots become conscious that they are robots? It's heartbreaking. And AI puts us, and it's only like a year old, right?
Right.
That
Yeah.
AI, which is dragging all of us into this new place where we've created such sophisticated search engines. And every time you use Google, you're using AI. Whenever I ask Google, which owns YouTube, to caption my latest YouTube video, that's AI. It's listening to my voice, it's putting it in English. I have to go through and fix the punctuation sometimes. But we're all already using it all the time anyway,
Right.
whenever you talk to Siri. So it's like, let's not get on our high horse and all complain about how AI is some evil thing. We
Right.
asked for this and here we are. So here we are, but like Mary Shelley's 1818 or whatever novel, Frankenstein asked almost 200 years ago, I guess 200 years ago, uh, what happens when we make a machine that we can't control. And I like your inquiry about there is a parallel, isn't there, between what the model of reincarnation ostensibly does for us humans, namely put us into tens of thousands of incarnations where we get to be every kind of person in every kind of situation. And then something lingers in our whatever it is about us that gets reincarnated. And so we carry this forward into hopefully more and more enlightened living. And in a way, the people who create AI are trying to replicate that in a much more rapid way
Mm.
by telling AI, go read everything on the internet.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, I did that already. And then
Right.
you're like, okay, write me a legal position on Roe v. Wade or something or whatever, right? People ask AI to do millions of things. And it kind of does it because it sort of can copy its, as its critics say, AI is just plagiarism software.
Right.
It makes new sentences, but it's incapable of what we usually mean by the phrase original thought. But then it starts to make you wonder, well, what is original thought? Because aren't I just sort of putting into new sentences everything that I've learned from all kinds of other teachers and sources? So it's a fascinating time. And I think that's a pretty interesting way of thinking about AI in terms of the reincarnation model. Reincarnation is a fascinating possibility. I'm not a reincarnation literalist. In my own thinking, I think that explanations like that are another beautiful, powerful, mythic image that conceptualizes something that is fundamentally mysterious. That life does go on, and there is carryover from form to form. Whether I am literally reincarnating as an individual person over and over, I don't know,
Right.
but you might say it's a very potent parable for some kind of conscious continuity, maybe on a collective level at least,
Mm.
through the thousands and thousands of years of our existence.
Right. And I think it's interesting too that like as many humans as we have and as much history as we can draw on, whether it's verbal history or written history or experienced, we still have an issue explaining the concept of love or something like that to this new technology that's coming out. It's like we can tell you all we want, but you gotta feel it. You gotta experience it. And
Right.
it's such a I think that's a beautiful message for us as human beings is that we're constantly looking to somebody to give us an answer, right? Like this beautiful book that you've written, the YouTube channel that you have, and the reason I found you is like somebody to make this make sense, right? But I think that beautiful thing that we just need to understand is like we all have that ability, right? Once we figure it out, like once we figure out the roadmap that makes sense to us, right? Like, a lot of people will, like myself, right? I got diagnosed with ADHD a while back. That was a crutch I used for a long time. Oh, I can't do that. I got ADHD. Oh, I'm sorry. I can't focus on that. I got ADHD, right? Well, yes, it can be that, but it could also be your superpower, right? If you find the way that ADHD was gifted to you, right, because of whatever reason, right, you find the justification within yourself, then we stop looking at this thing as a crush and we see the beauty that this gift gives us, right? And I think that's that power of finding the way that you learn and you ingest information is that you're going to be very different than anybody else, right? Like you might have failed high school chemistry, right? That final you failed. But if you really look at it, it takes some people a dozen times to pass the bar exam, right?
Yeah.
The volume in which you or the time frame in which you ingest knowledge doesn't matter. It's the fact that you just get it in there, right? So I think it's important to have that understanding that there's different ways to get it, there's different medias to get it in now, and there's different ways to approach teaching, learning, all that stuff within yourself. That don't lose hope, right? There's ways out there
Right.
for you to find this information and find ways to ingest it.
I think one of the things that makes us uncomfortable with AI is that it is essentially, in a word, mimicry.
Mm.
It is mimicking very successfully, pretending to be knowledge or insight. Like you could ask AI, what is chocolate? And as you were mentioning just a minute ago, it could spit out a beautiful paragraph about how chocolate tastes and the mouth feel and the depth and the acidity and the richness and that slightly burnt taste. And, it could wax poetic about what the experience of chocolate is, but it's never had chocolate.
Right. Yeah.
So it's like I don't trust you.
Yeah.
You're just really good at pretending to be. And I'm not saying there isn't value in pretending. I'm a big fan of like movies and stuff, right? Where an actor gets up there and pretends to be someone they're not, reads lines written by somebody else. It's all being beautifully lit and shot by this team of people, and it's all this bizarre theatrical illusion that I just adore, because that's what art is. It's the representation, the
Mm.
representation of real life. So it's not valueless, and AI has its place. We've just got to make sure, and this is an ancient struggle. We just have to make sure that the technology serves our humanity, and that our humanity does not begin to serve the technology. And I turn to the great stories to help us with that, starting with Frankenstein, on through the Star Wars stuff, and Darth Vader is is a great cautionary tale. He becomes the state, he
Mm.
becomes the machine, and we want to make sure that we don't become the machine, and that we retain our humanity. And our humanity is fundamentally undefinable.
Mm.
It is a mystery. It can't be programmed in ones and zeros, and code writers can't write it. It's because we can't define it. And so that fundamental mysteriousness is what makes us human. And that is the edge we're always going to have over AI.
There you go. The great mystery. Yeah, it's just something on Star Wars real quick. I was watching something the other day, and I watched an overlay of apparently George Lucas wanted to use the original actor of Darth Vader, the person, the physical actor of Darth Vader, not James Earl
Sure,
Jones' voice.
sure. I forgot his name. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I can't remember his name either, but he was a British gentleman, and
Tall dude. Yeah.
yeah, so he wanted to use his voice as Darth Vader, and so
Ah,
they filmed everything, and then when they went to the screening, the audience was like, "No, we're not feeling this."
really?
And so I heard a couple of scenes, like famous scenes, where he's crutching the guy's neck, the first
Yeah,
time,
right.
and just hearing the original
The
actor's
actor.
voice other than James Earl Jones, it made me laugh so much because it's like kind of high pitched, kind of like nasally. It's not
Yeah.
like that gruff, like dark Darth Vader voice that I'm used to.
Mhm.
I just had to throw that out there real quick because that just tickled me a little bit.
No, it's great. It's like, what's the difference between a classic rock song and a song nobody gives a shit about? It's like the guitar tone, or the way the drums are placed in the mix, or
Hmm.
the vocal sound, and it's really fascinating and mysterious to me. And what makes something connect in a huge way, and what makes another representation kind of uninteresting to most people. And
Totally.
that's the art of it. And believe me, nobody knows how that stuff works.
Yeah.
Some people just rise up and conquer all, like like Taylor's Swift.
Yeah. Right.
And there were 100,000 teenage singer-songwriters coming up when she was coming up, and nobody remembers any of those people.
Yep. Somehow the sway towards there is like the army or the military storm of the beaches of Normandy, right? There's no rhyme or reason why that person fell and you're still running, but fucking
Uh,
keep running, man. We'll figure
right.
it out.
There's it's chaos theory. There's just a little randomness to all of the ways that all these pieces unfold. Just get up and do the work that is yours to do, and let go of attachment to outcomes.
Definitely.
And
Definitely.
and most of us are not going to be rich and famous, and
Yep. But is that,
it's
is
probably overrated. I'll let you
oh
know when I get
gosh.
there, but
Yeah, right. Yeah. Yeah, you're closer than I am, Peter. You let me know, man.
how about that? Oh
Uh,
dear.
well, so you have the workbook coming that you've just dropped, and so
Yeah,
that's
it's
supporting.
available right now for free on my website. Just go to peterbolin.com. You'll see it right there on the landing page. It's
Beautiful.
called the Seven Stone Path Workbook. It's a PDF. You can just read it right there. You can download it to your device. You can print it. I'm just making that free for everybody on Earth who wants it. And that's a nice tool to have if you're going to put a little book group together around my book, or just grab it anyway. Even if you don't have my book, it might help you decide whether or not you want to read the book.
Right. And I think I mean, whether you read the book or not, definitely it references the book very nicely. But the questions that you ask, I think you could just layer over life. You know, you can really
Yeah.
just like understand like some of those questions. If we ask ourselves a lot of those questions on a regular basis, we might get a little bit more clarity as to like, that Father Michael idea we had earlier. What's my purpose for today? What am I
Yeah.
doing today? What am I going to be faced with? And do I have the strength to do it?
Yeah. Lord, no, how does it go? Is a God, take me where you want me to go. Let me meet who you want me to meet. Tell me what you want me to say and keep me out of your way.
There you go.
That's a
Yeah.
nice prayer. Roman Catholicism is not my path, but
Yeah.
I know a good prayer when I hear one. That's pretty awesome. Talk about letting go, right? And just saying, I'm going to allow Brahman or Tao or Dharmakaya or the Holy Spirit to kind of move through me right now. And it's not going to put me in some mystical cloud. It's going to make me super present to you and to this moment. And that's what all the wisdom traditions are asking us to do. Come out of the fog of your thoughts and come into this meeting, into this moment, into this conversation.
Yeah.
What does this person need? How can I be of service? That's what prayers like that help us do, and let go of the anxiety that I'm not good enough, that I won't know what to say. Of course we don't know what to say,
Yeah. You don't know
but
what it's going to be asked yet, though, you know?
just show up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember so I started using a version of that prayer slash mantra for my energy work, and it's
Mm.
especially when I'm doing sound healing. Like if I have a
What is
set,
it?
if I like, oh, I'm going to play this set, set list of sorts, right? It doesn't really
Yeah.
work, right? So I got to the practice of allow me to be a hollow bone conduit for the energies of the universe, right? So let those energies move through my hollow bones into whatever needs to happen, right? It's very very
Good.
similar to the Father Michael idea, and it was interesting because I think I'd been utilizing that mantra for a couple months, let's say about a dozen sound baths, and I had somebody come up to me after one of them that was pretty regular at the events that I hold, and they said, I don't know what you've done differently, um, but it it feels like there's 10 people playing instruments when you're up there. The
Awesome.
sounds that are being overlaid and all this stuff happening, and she said it sounds like it in my head I picture Krishna arms coming out from your back and everything grabbing mallets, and I'm just like, "Oh my god, that's like the nicest thing anybody's ever said." Because and it didn't hit me
Nice.
until till she said that, but that's basically what I'm asking to have happen is let
Yes.
me get out of the way, get my physical humanness out of the way, right? I have these limbs and I have these thumbs that can hold things, and I have an
Yeah.
ear that knows what sounds good. So outside of that, move it around, do some things, right? And
Yeah,
so
you're
that,
not sitting there thinking, "Oh, wait, my C bowl
right,
is going to fade more quickly than the G bowl, so I got to go back to the C bowl and maybe instead of, you know, spinning around to get the sound, maybe I need to hit it with the felt mallet or the wooden mallet." And it's like you're not thinking about any of
exactly,
that.
exactly. It's just it literally is just doing what it does. Like all of a sudden, my foot is hitting the gong. I'm like, okay, I guess that's happening now. Like shit,
That
here we
never
go.
happened before.
Right, totally. And so it's just it's such a beautiful thing to I think be witness to some of the work that you've been putting in, because the work is so hard sometimes, and that's again why I love this book is that it takes the word work out of it because it doesn't feel like work, right? It feels like you're ingesting something, you're learning, you're growing, you're developing. A lot of the work that we do feels like I'm being dragged headfirst over speed bumps, right? And it's like, oh God, here we
Mhm.
go again. Here's another trauma I'm unearthing. Here we go. This will be fun. So it's just it's nice when the work is uh, is approachable and
Yeah,
is
for sure.
meaningful and is deep, and it doesn't feel like you're swinging an axe.
No, I just want to sit down. To me, this book is an invitation just to let's sit down and have a conversation about some things that maybe we haven't thought about enough. And
Yeah.
I'm convinced that all the great gurus and Buddhas and prophets and sages of the past are absolutely ordinary people, like all of us. They just pay attention to things a little differently, and they spend their time a little differently. And so I don't think there's anything special uh, that we don't have.
Right.
And so it's a function of what are we spending our time and energy on. and maybe with some rather surprisingly small adjustments, we can a lot more can be revealed. And that's an exciting possibility, that you don't need all this complex arcane knowledge. You don't need to go out and buy a bunch of equipment. Um, you do if you're going to do sound work. You got to buy all those bowls, and,
Yeah.
and you've probably bought out every shop in the Pacific Northwest.
Keep
But
amassing them too, man. Just I got a new gong for Christmas I bought myself.
of
So
course you did.
yeah, why
You're
not?
like,
You know?
you're like a guitar player. Like 64 guitars isn't enough because that 65th one is the one. You know.
Man,
But
every time, man,
and
every
our
time.
and our and our partners just scratch their heads, if they're still around.
Right, exactly. It's the bowl or me, babe. Well, Peter.
Kids
So
need food, yeah, but this bowl.
exactly, you could eat
Listen to
cereal out of
this.
this bowl. I can play this. There's so many uses for it. I could justify anything.
It's for the healing, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, all right. So the newest thing you have to support the book is the workbook.
Yeah.
And it seems like you're going to be doing a bit of maybe touring or some promoting behind the book now that it's been out for a few months. So,
Yeah,
like,
we're
yeah, what are
starting.
those next kind of steps for you?
Sure. Now that the wonderful winter holidays are pretty much behind us, I'm looking to start a little more focused outreach. I'm doing quite a few book signing events around my neck of the woods, which is San Diego County. In fact, I'm going to one tomorrow. So I'm not doing a a tour where I hop on a plane and fly to Kirkland, Washington, and go to the Barnes and Noble. They don't know who the hell I am, and you know, the two books I would sell wouldn't cover the plane ticket. I'm not at that level. I'm a first-time self-published author. I'm relying on social media, things like this, wonderful allies and friends I meet along the way. Word of mouth is always the best thing. So I'm doing what I can, and I'm putting a little into some marketing, and that is just getting the word out, and letting I have this little stone on my desk. I know you can't read it as I'm showing it to you on the camera, but um, it says letting the book go to do its work. That was
Hmm.
kind of a mantra for me this last year. Been working on the book forever, but the hardest year was this last one, really, in those final polishes and publication issues and permissions and et cetera. And
Yeah.
just this idea of like, just let the damn book go, like you've been gestating this thing for decade and a half. It's like, let it go. It's like that great Picasso line, art is never finished, but merely abandoned.
Hmm.
And because you never know when that song you're trying to record is done, or that painting you're painting, or, you know,
Yep.
you just have to let it go. So it's like I'm letting this book go, and it is what it is, and all of its imperfections are there. And now I'm just going to see how it meets people, and I enjoy the feedback I'm getting. And no, I don't have a second book in mind yet, but it's a distinct possibility. I'm certainly not shaping that right now.
Awesome. And I think the imperfections, whatever they are, right? And
Yeah.
the author is going to be the one that's going to see the more imperfections than anybody else, right?
For sure.
But I was listening to somebody talking. I think it was D'Angelo, the musician, was talking the other day in some interview, and was talking about the soul of music has kind of gone away.
Mm.
We can quantize everything, so everything's on the one, the two, three, the four, whatever it is, right? Everything's on the beat. Auto tune for vocals, right? So everything's right pitch, flat sharps, they're all gone now. Everything is right where it needs to be. But
Hmm.
that's taken that perception of soul out of the music because everybody doesn't sing perfectly. If you listen to James Brown rough track from back in the 60s and 70s, there's so many flats and sharps and missteps and all this shit that's happening. D'Angelo himself pioneered this thing called drunk drumming back in the 90s, when
Ah,
quantizing was starting to become very popular and everything was on every single beat. He purposefully made it to where it didn't. Like he would clearly miss the one and hit like on the one and a quarter, right?
yeah.
Shit like that, right? Stuff that maybe a lot of people outside of the music world wouldn't understand, but you feel,
No, but you can feel it.
right? And so I think there's a beauty in the imperfections of
Yeah.
a project because we're not perfect, right? And so to expect perfection is an arbitrary thing. And so, like you said, abandon it, put it out there. It's like the Guns N' Roses Chinese Democracy album, right? Axl Rose worked on that for like 15 years. It was supposed to be the most amazing thing. It ended up being a terrible album, right?
Yeah,
Just
yeah.
critically just bashed and all this shit because he took too much time rewriting, repolishing, redoing every little note, every little thing. It's got to be exactly where it is. Get it out there. Let the world take it. Go, go on to the next project.
Get on to the next thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, those old Rolling Stone songs, they speed up. They're at a different
Right.
BPM. They're at a different beats per minute at the end than they were at the beginning because they're recording live, staring at each other, and whatever Charlie does, that everybody else just follows them. And there's nothing like those old Stone songs.
hmm
There's a swagger and a swing and a rock that you're never going to get with a click track.
Right.
And so you're right. There's a message there for all of us who are creating anything, whether you're cooking dinner tonight or designing your garden, whatever you're creating, you're cooperating with things around you. And the again, that mysterious, unquantifiable humanness that has to be a part of our work, and it is unavoidably a part of our work unless we wring it all out with AI and iTunes, excuse me, and you know vocal correction software and making everything line up on the beat. Um, that's that's not what we really need.
Yeah. Yeah. We need the imperfections. It's perfect in its imperfections.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Peter, I thank you again for your time. Thank you for this contribution that you've made. The book, the YouTube you put out there, all the information you make that is approachable, that is just for us to find and to chew on. Really excited to see what this next chapter is for you and whatever it takes you in the imperfectness of the perfections that it is. We're here to support you in any way we can, man. So thank you for what you
Thank you,
do.
Adam. And
And
you're a great resource and a beacon and a lighthouse to many. Journey of the Modern Soul is one of those quality podcasts that we all wish had a bigger audience, but it finds the right people, and
yeah.
you're changing things with the work that you're doing. I'm really excited to be back on the show with you. Thank you so much, sir.
Oh, well, thank you, Peter. We'll look forward to having you back again, man. Thank you so much for spending time with Peter and I. Please check out the show notes for links to get the book and also the workbook, ways to support Peter or support the show. Obeisance and love. We'll see you next time.